Hey guys, what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome to another commentary during our March of Kong marathon this month in March 2019. And today we are here to discuss probably one of my favorite episodes I've ever worked on, and that is essentially the season finale to Season 2, which is a review of Kongfrontation, the iconic crown jewel of Universal Studios Florida back from 1990 to 2002. What I really like about this episode, first of all, when I first started Season 2, we shot the majority of it at Universal Studios Florida, and when I was filming it, it was the first time I had stepped on the Florida park in over 10 years. So I knew I wanted to start it at the park and then end it at the park with a review of this ride. Now my experience with the ride, interesting enough, is really interesting. So the first time I ever rode Kongfrontation was back in 1998. I was about, I want to say like 7 years old. And when I rode it the first time, it was a very interesting experience. Like, I can remember it in my head, I can remember the lighting, I can remember the animatronic itself, and it was pretty spectacular. Like, it scared the shit out of me, obviously, but later on, it honestly, like, I grew to it, like, as an adult, really appreciating being one of those people who were able to survive Cog's rampage in New York, Florida. And yes, they did use stock footage from the 1976 film, which I found out later. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's a really interesting concept. So, yeah, I knew I wanted to end it with something that was one of my biggest influences making films, which was when I visited Universal Studios Florida the first time, I was really captivated in what it took to make movies, and because of that, I really got it. Like, it was Kong, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and then going to Universal, that really kind of inspired me to make films. So, and I'll admit, like, the Kong ride is probably like was the best ride in the park. So it was something I wanted to review for a while and give a real in-depth look on. And because of this review, actually, there's been several other video essays talking about the ride in much more detail. From Yesterworld Entertainment to theme park reviews. I can't remember who's the other ones that were reviewing these rides. I think like Defunctland did a really good review of this ride. But I was really the first one to really crack the code in reviewing this the Kongfrontation ride. So when when reviewing it, I had to look up the entire history of the ride, go into a lot of details and everything. It was quite an experience getting to figuring out where everything went, what happened, and so on. And yes, the music I used in this part of the review is from the ride. I was able to obtain it from a private collector, and I love the track. I really wish more of the entire Kongfrontation soundtrack would be released in some form, because I actually think the soundtrack on its own really works. Now, yeah, like, so going back to Florida, so the second time I rode Kongfrontation was in the year 2000, and I was a little less interested in it at the time, but I'm really glad I was able to, like, look at both times seeing the ride. But then when I came back 10 years later, having known it was gone and a lot of other attractions were gone, it was a very surreal experience, honestly. Like, it was a very surreal feeling of kind of sadness in seeing like, how these rides that I grew up on essentially were no longer there. And I basically, I kind of, like, when I was walking into the studio for the first time in over 10 years, my first stop was actually at Revenge of the Mummy, because I wanted to just kind of reflect of where I was back then. And I walked in, and it was a very surreal experience. It was just kind of, you felt Kong's presence at that point, honestly. And because of that, I'd gone to Universal Orlando countless times, year after year, and I've always tried to obtain information from it. And yeah, so I always would talk with people running the park. I've gotten to know a few people who were at the park, and they actually, because I was telling them stuff that even they didn't know, and they were actually really impressed that I had all this knowledge. But in terms of, like, finding anything left from the attraction, there are a few things. You can go to, they have, like, on the mummy kind of symbols, like the Kong look to them, like the Kong face. as well as the remaining tram track is still on the roof of the back lot. And there is a King Kong golden statue in Revenge of the Mummy, which I want a replica of that statue, of that golden statue, because it looks absolutely beautiful. So I edited this episode when I was in Florida. Like, after we visited Universal, we stayed in Fort Lauderdale for a little bit, and I brought my tower with me to do editing. So it was really great to get this all done and edited pretty quickly and have it out for that following month. And so it was also fun to like find a bunch of footage from the ride and everything, which is pretty spectacular. Like, okay, so that's the thing, the animatronics, all the props from this ride apparently like were just recycled, destroyed, or parts were sold on eBay, apparently. Somebody, from what I heard, owns one of the trams, and that some of the Kong props were actually put in a storage unit in one of the back lots of the Florida park. They keep them there for just storage stuff, but it's pretty much off limits to the public. Even people running the park can't even get in there, which is interesting. So there is a part of me that like wants to review more of the attractions. I mean, since I've done this review, I have kind of semi-reviewed the Jaws ride, I've reviewed the Back to the Future ride, and I've somewhat reviewed the Earthquake attraction. But there is a part of me who wants to do more in-depth reviews of these rides, but I think in doing so I would probably want to host them at Universal Florida if I can. But who knows, maybe in the future I could probably take a look at more of the Kongfrontation, or the Universal classic attractions. I also did take a look at the E.T. adventure when I was doing my E.T. review as well. I do try to mention them whenever I can. So it was fun to get footage like that where somebody would film from the back of the tram and get Kong's last stand. Now, I have been actually obtaining a ton of footage and pictures as part of my digital Kongfrontation collection, so whenever I have any resources that look good, I'll use them. Even speculated that it was because of 9/11. Yeah, actually, that was an actual rumor for a while. One of the reasons it closed was because of, in a post 9/11 world, in where New York has explosions and stuff, it wasn't really appropriate. But that's not really the case. It was mostly closed due to maintenance problems, and it was just costing too much money, like most of the attractions. Now, when I filmed this, obviously my hair looked pretty bad. Like, I was sweating that day. It was a hot day, but yeah, at the time, they were constructing Reign of Kong, and I decided to do this little promotion for the promotion for the attraction to just kind of get people excited for it. That Kong was coming back at that time, which was pretty exciting. Now, yeah, there is rumors that this photo bus still exists. It still survives in, like, the storage units, apparently. And I really think, like, that's one of the things the Reign of Kong attraction should have, is a photo op, honestly, like the old ride. And I love that shot too, because I shot most of this early in the morning at Universal. And when I did, like, I was there super early at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and there was a huge fog cloud that kind of filled the park. And it was just a really interesting kind of, environment to be in, where it's an empty park with this fog bank. It's really, really interesting. That involved real elements. And yeah, since then, the Disaster Ride is gone, Beetlejuice is gone, now that's part of Fast and Furious. It was a show of entertainment, and this was also me just kind of going on a tirade of how, like, all the rides there are now 3D attractions, and that they don't focus on the filmmaking aspect anymore. So, now, I will admit, a lot of this stuff is inspired from James Rolfe's The Dragon of My Dreams when he goes to visit a piece of his childhood. So this is something I also wanted to do, was to go visit where one of my biggest inspirations were. So, now that I'm here, I think it's time for me. Yeah, I did want to pay respect. Like, I had this idea of this whole concept where I would actually, like, bring either a thing of flowers or, like, a thing of bananas, and I would just lay them where Kong was. I'd lay it as part of, like, a memorial, like putting flowers at a gravesite. But obviously I don't know if Universal sells bananas at the park, but I didn't see any flowers and stuff. I couldn't afford it, so I just, like, did this tribute to the photo op Kong, where I knew exactly where to angle the shot and where to put the camera. And yeah, right there is where the old photo op used to be. And this music is from Waterworld. I always like to use the Waterworld score when I can, because it's one of my favorite soundtracks. Now, yeah, the original version of this did get pulled down from YouTube, and I had to go back and change it. It was due to this audio here of the Max Steiner score. So I had to go back and find a more public domain free version of the track, and I just basically redubbed it there. So, yeah, I will admit, this is probably one of my favorite episodes I worked on. I really enjoyed just giving people the history of Kongfrontation, because it's a ride that I feel is very significant to the history of the park. And for anybody who experienced it, let me know in the comments below how you were on the ride, if you really enjoyed it. So, and yeah, I did have to add that 10 out of 10 at the end. But yeah, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Until the next video, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you guys later. This is Big Jack Films signing off, and let's keep up with the March of Kong.